Welcome to Man About Danville with Logan H. Gurman, a podcast for Danville, Kentucky, and beyond. Conversations with friends, and you get to listen. Brought to you by the Logan Company, a commercial and residential real estate brokerage for Danville and Central Kentucky. 80% Danville-centric, 20% eccentric.
Good morning, Danville, Kentucky. You're listening to Man About Danville, the most influential and the fastest growing podcast for Danville, Boyle County, the surrounding region of Central Kentucky, and probably the whole darn state. I am, of course, the man about Danville himself, Logan H. Gurman. Thank you for joining me. Whether you are in your car, on a commute, on a road trip, on vacation, at work, at the gym, on a run, raking your leaves, running an Ironman triathlon at the beach like a couple of my friends and listeners, getting a pumpkin spice latte, or putting up your Christmas tree way too early, I appreciate you making this podcast a part of your day. I sincerely appreciate your listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, I hope you'll consider sharing it wherever you listen. There should be a little share button. If you would hit that and post it to the social media platform of your choosing, I'd appreciate it. It helps me grow the podcast. It helps my numbers, helps my ratings. Be sure to tag me so I can thank you personally. This week, it is a special joint cast or a shared podcast this week. Today, I talk with the other most popular podcast in Danville and Boyle County and the surrounding area. This is basically every major podcaster in Danville and Boyle County right in one place. Brian Wofford and Harold Edwards have gotten together to launch the Uncommon History of the South podcast. If you are a history buff or want to know more about local history or Kentucky history, I highly recommend it. They talk about all kind of cool things like John Dillinger, Frank and Jesse James, noted Kentuckian Cassius Clay, the original, not the one that turned boxer, although they may get to him too. So look for them wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you listen to me. You can probably find them as well. In the search bar, put in Uncommon History of the South. By the way, this episode is being jointly released on both platforms simultaneously, so you can listen to the same content here or on their podcast. Now, let's get on with the show. Brian Wofford, former high school classmate of mine, or you were the year ahead. I've got your yearbook picture. I've got it. I'll share it. I'll put it in the show notes afterward. How about that?
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Welcome. And Harold Edwards. Harold, thank you for being with me today.
You're welcome.
So, I call to order this official first meeting of the Danville-Boyle County Podcasters Association. As far as I know, the three of us in the room have the market cornered. Do you guys know of any other podcasts in town?
Not locally, I don't know of.
I don't know of anybody else in town.
No, not right now, no.
Okay. Stuart Sanders is kicking around the idea. I'll just cut that out.
When we interviewed Stuart, he talked about doing a podcast.
He's too busy writing books to actually sit down and talk to anybody, though. So anyway, so speaking of that, you all are the podcasters, you all the producers, you all have generated the Uncommon History of the South podcast that's available everywhere this podcast is available on all your local podcasting apps. Tell us what it is and how you all got the idea.
Well, basically, I've known Harold my whole life. Harold was my RA leader, youth leader at church growing up when I was a kid. And we happen to attend Southland Christian here in Danville now, and we're in a life group together. And we, as a life group, we get together and we'll go out and eat every so often. Of course, Corona's kind of crushed that for us. But and Harold has so many great stories about history, and he was telling one of his stories at dinner. And I'm like, Harold, I need to get a video. And matter of fact, the story was our first podcast episode, John Dillinger in Gravel Switch. And I said, we need to get a recorder or something and go down and video you telling this story, because there's a lot of people here that doesn't realize that John Dillinger actually lived in Gravel Switch for a little while. And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, trying to record, I'm not that good with a camera. I said, why don't we just do a podcast? So I'm a visual learner. Thank goodness for YouTube. So I started
agree.
Yeah, so I started doing some research and put it together and bought some equipment. And Harold and I, so we just kind of sat down and Harold tells stories and I record them and kind of add my comments. But I think our main goal is just to capture that oral tradition of passing stories down. I know my grandfather, used to tell me stories about where we grew up and where he grew up. And those are being lost now, I think, in this generation. It's not as common. So basically it was to help capture Harold's knowledge of histories and the stories, because he knows so much more about his people, historical people and events. I mean, like say, the Civil War, he knows more than Army A lined up on one side, Army B lined up on another, and this is where they fought. He can tell you about the individuals that fought in those battles. And that's always been fascinating to me, and that's why I wanted to do it. But
Well, I had to be honest. I didn't even know what a podcast was. I'm kind of old school, So he had to explain to me what a podcast was, and I said, "Well, I don't have to be seen, so that probably is a bit is a positive." But it's in my mind when Brian and I sat down and discussed this. I said, all these stories I have in my head, and I'm not a writer. I wish I was, but I'm not, and I'm not going to be. It's just not going to happen at my age. So I said, this is a great way to preserve these stories for not only my family, but others, whoever's interested, And that was my main motivation. And then we just kind of go from there, and it's a lot of fun. We have a ball doing it, and getting to bring other people in to our format is really neat. So it's been a blast, to be honest with you.
There's such a long history of oral tradition of history, and there's so much of it, and there's no way it can all be captured, written down. So you all are kind of continuing the oral tradition of passing history along one generation to another. I would like to point out, Brian, you in your day job, you've got a day job. You are the Boyle County jailer.
that's correct.
I don't know what else we want to say about that other than that's what you do on a daily basis. Brian, you grew up here enough that you went to high school here? Is your family from the area?
Yes.
And Harold, yours is too?
Oh, yes.
How far back do your all's families go?
I go back to 1780s, pioneer times.
Okay.
Mine as well, and of course, actually doing a genealogical search, doing genealogy, I actually found out Harold and I are related, and we're actually kin to Abraham Lincoln. So my family goes back that far as well. So
I know my family goes back here in the area to pre-Civil War and earlier than that on my mother's side in Fayette County. But so is the Civil War era your all's favorite era of history, or are there some others that capture your interest?
I love the Civil War. I love the Revolutionary War, World War II. I just like history in general, and I love old buildings. I love going to like places that's that nobody's may have lived there for 50 years, but there's a lot of history to it. I just always been fascinated by it, even when I was little.
Well, I think I've often thought of historians are seekers of the truth. I think what motivates me is when you start doing research, no matter what it is, if it's on your own family or some story you've heard about, most of our urban legend stories, they have a basis of fact. Now, they can be exaggerated and they can be misplaced in time, but most of them that I have researched do have some basis of fact. I mean, things happened. And I think when you get into that, you start researching. It's like a mystery you're trying to solve. And when you find out the truth and find out really what happened, as much as you can know the truth, sometimes truth can be very elusive. But when you get into it, you realize that it's always seems like to have as a practical explanation. But we just don't know what that is. We're not in that time frame. We're not in that situation. So I think historians are seekers of the truth. We like to know what really happened, really. That's the best explanation I can give of what motivates me to do this.
You said one of your most popular episodes was regarding John Dillinger, and he used to live in the Gravel Switch area, that kind of nebulous area between Boyle County and Marion County. Has there always been a history of trouble coming up from Marion County into Perryville, especially post-Civil War?
Well, I think you'll find that there's, quote, trouble everywhere. It just depends on what particular time frame you're looking at. If you look at the events right after the Civil War and during the end of 1864 and 5, the last 2 years of the war, the guerrilla warfare in Kentucky, which we'll probably be doing a podcast on shortly, it was just out of control. And there were I've got like 63 people that were killed just in the central Kentucky region by one guerrilla group. So it depends on the time frame. That area of Marion County wasn't really known for bootlegging like the western end of Marion County. But John Dillinger came there because it was in the middle of, quote, nowhere. He could hide out there and be in a place that nobody could find him very easily.
It still kind of is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it depends on, how you define nowhere. I personally love nowhere. I think I'd rather be in nowhere than the middle of a big city right now. But
I'm not going to argue with that either. Obviously, both of you all are from the Perryville area. You grew up around the Perryville battlefield, and you've seen it expand especially over the past 10 or 15, 20 years. What are some of your favorite stories concerning the history of Perryville?
Well, I'm a member of the Battlefield Commission, which has been appointed by the third governor. This is a commission that we kind of help oversee the park and advise in the way things should be done, preservation. The American Battlefield Trust is responsible for most of the land that has been added to the park in the last few years. It's up to about 1,400 acres now. About 750 of it is in natural habitat. And if people haven't visited the park and walked those trails, you really need to. It's really a beautiful place. This year we had our first nesting pair of bald eagles, and so we're real excited about that. We've got some really rare owls, northern owls, that are frequenting there now and made that their home, which we didn't have before. And the quail habitat, the deer, everything has just exploded.
It's a beautiful place down there, and it's almost taken for granted that we have such a beautiful and historic site right here in our own backyard. I mentioned the John Dillinger episode. What are some other episodes that you've done that were popular or that you all were really proud of?
Well, I think Frank and Jesse James, I don't think a lot of people realize that they travel through this area. Morgan, just down the road in Moreland, one of Frank and Jesse James' brother-in-laws actually killed a man and took his horse. There's a lot of history that's happened or occurred in central Kentucky that people are not aware of. You don't learn it in school. It's not in the textbooks. But that's a good one. Of course, we interviewed actor Steve Zahn. I think it was our 2 podcasts ago. Of course, he's not native to Kentucky, but when he came to Kentucky, he fell in love with it. So and he's also a history buff. So he shared, his love of history in Kentucky. He loves Kentucky. He could live anywhere he wants to live, but he chooses to remain in Kentucky.
He and I become friends, and he's come to the house and he'll sit for hours and get me to tell these stories. And it really surprised me. One of the things that he talked about was the oral tradition. It's unique to have a place that people sit and reflect and talk about the past. And it really surprised me because I never thought of that. I thought everybody did that. So he's a very talented man, but he has a very keen interest in Perryville, and he already's helped us a lot. He's going to be helping a lot more. He's just has a passion for it. He said his favorite place in the world was to sit on the porch of the bottom house. And like I said, here's a guy that could probably live anywhere or go anywhere, but he just likes that atmosphere, the down-home feel to that place, and the history that he experiences when he's there.
And hopefully he's going to actually sit in and kind of guest co-host a couple episodes for us as well. So
the celebrity co-host.
Yeah.
That's taking everything next level.
It is.
I'm going to have to get myself an Ed McMahon or something if I'm going to keep up.
Since this is kind of a sharecast, you mind if I ask you a couple questions?
Lay it on me.
What type of podcast do you listen to? I know you listen to Uncommon History of the South, of course. We listen to Man About Danville, so.
I'll give I told Harold before you got here, this whole thing kind of started when I made a Facebook post that I was going to start a podcast, and I had a bunch of people say, "Oh, you should do it, and I'll be a guest." And I've been fortunate that a lot of people have. A friend of mine in Atlanta, Paul Ollinger, has a podcast called Crazy Money, and he has had an interesting career, and it's on the psychology and the philosophy of money and how it relates to happiness or unhappiness. And it's a really intelligent, sensitive analysis of economics, both personally and on a bigger platform. And he interviews people that write books and things like that. Everybody listens to KSR, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You can't avoid Kentucky sports radio. And I listen to Tim Ferriss frequently. I think he usually has a lot of smart, sharp ideas. Harold, I don't know where to begin with you.
It's my wife's sister.
Have you been interested in history since you were a kid?
I can't remember when I wasn't.
Did you have a grandparent or anything that it meant something to?
There you go. See, especially in the winter when you were bored.
When there's no TV, when there's no
TV.
internet, when you have multiple generations of a family that live close together,
right.
You would go sit on the front porch and tell stories. And as our society spreads out and people don't live as close to their parents or their grandparents or their cousins, you lose some of that. So you had a grandparent that...
Yeah, Papa, he was born in 1880, died in 1985, and he influenced me, I guess, as much as anybody as far as storytelling, because I used to sit for hours and listen to him. Of course, older people, they forget. He would tell it over and over, and I'm probably doing the same thing now. And so,
never wanted to let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's right. So anyway, I would sit and listen to him, and he was a country preacher's son, meaner than a snake. I mean, he was just a character. See, when he died, an era passed with me. A guy that cut his own firewood with an axe, not a chainsaw. Never owned one in his life. Here's a guy that grew grape harbors and made wine. He grew his, pretty much self-sufficient type guy. He would hickory bottom chairs. Who would take the time, and who would care to put hickory splits in the bottom of a chair? But he did. He handmade all of his axe handles and hammer handles and things. He never wasted anything. There's a self-dependence and efficiency of these people that I really admired, and it's totally lost today. I'll give you an example. I talked about hickory bottom in chairs. He would go back in the knobs, and I'd go with him, and he took a draw knife and an axe and a hatchet, and he would take that draw knife and he would start at the top as far as he could reach, and he would strip the bark off of a tree all the way around it, and he would tie it up in a bundle, and then he'd cut the tree down and chop it up into sections axe length handle lengths, and he would bring that home, and then he would make axe handle out of that tree and use the bark to bottom chairs. He would soak it, and, I've seen him do this process, and I'm like, even back then I thought, man, that's an awful lot of trouble, a lot of work. But, he hewed out rock and laid his own cellar, and, just hard work. And who would do that today?
In our consumer-driven culture, so much of that is just gone and probably never coming back.
When something breaks, throw it away, buy a new one.
Yeah, it's cheaper to do that.
But, he always seemed content.
Right. Oh, I was fortunate enough that when I was young, my great-grandmother was still living, and she lived through the Great Depression, never threw away a butter container, never threw away a rubber band. And now I'm raising teenagers, and the world has changed.
I'd like to know how many meals my grandmother sent back to college with me in butter containers. Here, because with Sunday dinner was the big thing. And so when we'd come in, we'd meet for Sunday dinner, she would always load up the butter containers, everything, send back with me to college so I'd have something to eat. So
before you were the jailer, you were in law enforcement.
Correct.
Did you work undercover any?
I did. I actually, of course, I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. I was military police.
Did you go straight out of high school? Or
no, I actually went to college for about a year and a half and decided I need to go to the Marine Corps for a little while. So after the Marine Corps, after active duty, I went back to Eastern and started and stayed in the reserves.
After the Marine Corps, college didn't seem so difficult?
Exactly. I think I'd made the right choice. So I actually stayed in the reserves and was an MP. And of course, after college, I went into sales for a couple of years and decided I wanted to go back into law enforcement. And so Lexington was hired, and I applied for the Lexington Police Department, was hired, and I spent about 5.5 years there. And then I had the opportunity to move back home and work at the Sheriff's Department. And then while I was there, they actually wanted me to come over and do narcotics work because I'd started that career path in Lexington. And ended up working a little over 2.5 years I spent with DEA at Lexington. And then after that contract was up, basically I'd have to drive to Lexington every morning, then drive to Eastern Kentucky. So I'd get home at 3 o'clock in the morning a lot of times. And that was a little rough on family life and having a young daughter. So after that contract was up, I didn't renew it, and I came back with the Sheriff's Department, and then the state police said, hey, we need somebody to do what you've been doing for the DEA for us in your area. So Marty Elliott was a sheriff, and we talked about it, and so I actually spent about 3.5 years working with Desi East.
Were you for the Sheriff's Department? Or?
I was dually sworn, so my employer doing both of those was the Sheriff's Department, but I was a TFO, which is a task force officer for the DEA and state police.
You got any historically related stories you want to share of your times in
Probably not.
Well, we'll tell those after the mics get turned.
Yeah.
And Harold, you were a businessman, a salesperson here in town for years, and you're retired now.
Yes.
So you're just podcasting full time,
among other things.
Working on a car.
Well, among what other things?
Well, I guess for the last 30 years. I do Civil War shows, and I deal in Civil War stuff, and so that's been part of my life for a long time. I also have been restoring a Model A and a Model T, which is just about driving me crazy, to be honest with you. But it's not that it's so technical, but daggone, it's just a learning curve I haven't got around yet. You know,
is this your first attempt at restoring vehicles? Or?
Yeah, it's been going on for about 4 or 5 years now. So I'm not a mechanic. You know, I never liked working on cars, but I love old stuff. So yeah, I'm keeping busy, that's for sure.
So do you kind of trade in Civil War paraphernalia?
Yeah, it's been kind of a sideline business for me for a long time. I'm kind of a specialist in Kentucky rifles, and I've studied that most of my life. I don't know why. I've always just been interested in that stuff. My grandfather gave me a gun barrel when I was a little kid, and he had it wired to a piece of stock. It's just a piece of junk, basically. But it really captured my imagination, and I guess that's what got me started. I don't know. I don't really remember when I wasn't interested in it. I'll tell you a little story. I was when I was about 10 or 12 years old. I was at I think it was a pawn shop on Main Street in Danville, and I believe maybe it was Fox and Crow was there then. I can't remember the name of it. And the first muzzle-loading rifle that I ever bought, I bought it there, and it was like $50 or something, just an old half-stock rifle. Really wasn't that great a thing, but it was to me. And I'd saved my money, and I went in and bought it. And I was on my way out. There was a guy sitting by the door whittling, and he stopped my dad because my dad worked for the post office and delivered his mail, and it was Clemens Coyle. And so
there's an episode.
Yeah. So Clem asked me, he said, "Are you interested in that stuff?" And I said, "Oh, yeah," you know, and of course, Daniel Boone was on television, you know, and as hokey as it looks today, back then it was really something, you know, I look forward to that. So anyway, he told my dad, he said, the next time it snows and you don't have school, said, bring him out to the house and leave him all day. And I didn't have a clue. I didn't know if I wanted to go out there or not, you know. I didn't know this guy. So Dad told me, he said, I think he's got a big collection of stuff. Said, you might want to go.
He did have a big collection of stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, we went, it wasn't a couple of days till it snowed, and sure enough, we didn't have school, and I went out there, and I tell everybody, you ruined me for life, you know. But oh my goodness. Probably one of the world's best American Indian artifact collection. Just one thing right after the other. And so that really got me going. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after that. I really didn't.
Miriam Kubali took my English class out to Clemens' house in the 80s. And everybody in town knew the Cowell family. And, of course, there are Cowells still around here. And if people don't know, that's that big, pretty white house on the end of Maple Avenue. And he had quite, just like you said, quite possibly one of the largest private collections of American Indian artifacts anywhere. There was a story somebody told me about Tecumseh's pipe. Have you ever heard that story?
Yes.
You want to share it, or am I going to ruin a future episode for you?
No, it'd be a short story, but he had a doctor, I think it was in Oklahoma, that brought him that pipe. I think he met this doctor at a KRA, Kentucky Rifles show in Pennsylvania. We still go. We still have it there every year. And I'm a member of the KRA, and Clemens was too at that time. And this guy brought this pipe, and he said, you know, my granddaddy said that they took it off Tecumseh in the Battle of the Thames in the War of 1812, and said, I don't know anything about it. Said, would you take it and study it and everything? So he took the thing home, and it was we called a wood platform pipe inlaid with pewter, and it's like an Indian sitting on a log holding a pipe, and it's the neatest thing you'll ever see. It was sold at Cowan's auction. I think it brought $168,000, and Clint ended up getting it from the guy later. And I remember sitting looking at it, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was lined with pewter, and that way when you smoked it, it wouldn't burn the wood. So it was very skillfully made. These things are not crude.
Clemens passed away a number of years ago. His wife passed later, and all these artifacts were dispersed at more than one auction in a couple different places. So the collection's been dispersed all over the country now, I suppose. Were you at any of those?
Yeah, of course, I was at the sale, and I bought a few things there, but not Indian. Most of the Indian artifacts, Peggy had formed a committee of about 5 people that she trusted to help her with the dispersal of that, and I think it's a very smart way to do it. And there were some big-time collectors came in, and they made bids on things, I think, the way it worked. And, she did. I tried to help with a couple things that they had. Yeah, it's a shame in a way that collection got busted up, because I have pictures of it, and when I tell people about it, you just can't describe that. And when I show them those pictures, they just stand with their mouth open. It's like amazing. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable.
I remember we were in one of those side parlors, and it was just you just don't expect to see that, and you don't see it anymore. But I'm glad that those pieces got to be distributed to people who appreciated them, even though they're not in one personal collection anymore.
And that's one of the things we started doing with Harold's collection is we're taking photographs and stuff and posting those on our social media pages, because he has some unique pieces as well.
The photographs are things that, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And one of the things that I did when I was real young is checked out Matthew Brady's photographic history of the Civil War. And I was always fascinated with the earliest photography, because that's the earliest true glimpse of time that you can see. And it speaks of more than I can ever explain when you study those photographs.
Yeah, the Civil War coincided with the dawn of photography, and like Camp Nelson down the road here had a camp photographer there who would take the picture of the soldiers and send it so they could send something home to their loved ones. And
I think people would be totally blown away if most people drive by that house, what's preserved now there.
Which one?
There's a big house out there on the right, Camp Nelson.
Oh, okay.
It's just a very small part of that, but that was a huge complex.
Huge the whole camp, enormous.
Yes. Bakery, wagon manufactory. They had a water system that pumped up from the Kentucky River, and it was just amazing the size and scope of that place.
Do you guys want to divulge who you've got coming up anytime soon? Do you have any big guests, any surprise guest stars coming up?
Well, we haven't. We don't think as far down the road as you might think we do.
Oh, I understand that. For me, this is a week-to-week operation.
We do want to do a really good one on Daniel Boone, and I'm going to try to get a hold of Ted Ballou, and he wrote the most recent book on basically Daniel Boone's grave. Where's the real Daniel Boone buried? He just finished a really good book on that. So we'll probably, if we can get him, we're going to have him on there. I'll probably ask Joni House to be on there. She's president of the Friends Group at Perryville, and try to educate the public a little bit about how the battlefield works, how the American Battlefield Trust buys this land, and what the process is that makes the battlefield what it is today. That's another thing we'd like to do. And we might branch out, and we're going to do one on the Confederate submarine, the Hunley, that was lost in Charleston Harbor. I was there when it was raised, and so I'll get to tell that story and talk about that experience. And Brian, have you got any you'd like?
Really, podcast is about Harold. I'm more of the hype man, the Flavor Flav of the guy of the duo here.
Yeah. On a side note, I met Flavor Flav.
Oh, it was okay.
I tried to trade hats with him. He wouldn't do it. But anyway, that's another story.
So, this is more about his stories. I just I'm the color commentator. I kind of sit and giggle when he's telling stories, which some of them are pretty funny, but, kind of help produce it. And basically, so it's really about whatever he wants to do or whatever he wants to share.
The challenge we have is presenting this in an entertaining way. You can bore people to death with details. You get caught up in that as a historian. You better be careful, if you're doing a podcast, because a lot of people don't want to hear a lot of detail. They want to hear
they want to be entertained,
see the big picture, and they want to be entertained. So that's a challenge for me, because I'm a detail guy. I can be pretty dry and boring.
Well, I can see some of the listeners that you all have may want to drill down. If you're interested in history enough that you're going to listen to a history podcast, I can see how some folks would really like to drill down deep and get the rest of the story, as certain people in radio have said. When the COVID thing lifts, are you guys going to take the show on the road? Are you going to take a field trip to Charleston? Or
We've discussed that. We've talked about doing something, kind of doing a podcast from a location somewhere, but we don't have anything planned as of yet. But we're considering it.
I've got an idea for you. Now, I don't know whether you're looking for ideas or not. But between firearms and local history, George Chin from over in Mercer County. Have you?
Oh, I knew him well.
Oh, did you know him personally?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I read the book. What was he like?
Well, I see my problem was I got George when he was really late in life, and he'd starting to lose his faculties when I really got to be around him a lot. But he was a wealth of knowledge, obviously.
Oh, he must have been.
And of course, he had a lot to do with writing the book through 200 years history of Harrodsburg, and he was an arms historian. He come from a very historic family, for that matter. Matter of fact, Frank James, by the way, we talked about the James brothers. Frank was with his uncle. There's a picture of him when he was campaigning for, I can't remember who he was campaigning for, somebody running for president or something. But Frank James was great friends with the Chin family, and he helped start horse races. And but the Chin family is a very historic family, and I've known him and his daughter, through the Harrodsburg Historical Society. But yeah, he was a tremendous wealth of information. He and I shared a similar interest in Benjamin Mills, the gun maker we just did to finish the podcast on. So
the guy who lived in Harrodsburg moved to Lexington.
Yes. Yeah.
The two podcasts I think I'm looking forward to, one would be Daniel Boone, because probably 99.8% of what I know about Daniel Boone is probably not accurate, just because of the TVs and the movies and everything and what's in popular culture. And the other one would be Uncle Top's Cabin, because it's actually based on a family in Garrett County. I
knew it was based on a Kentucky family. I didn't realize it was in Garrett County.
Yeah, I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but there's a book called The Life of Lewis Clark Amongst the So-Called Christians of Kentucky. It's a rare book. I have it, and I've read it a couple times. And he was one of the main characters in the book, and he met with Harriet Beecher Stowe. He escaped Kentucky and got up into the north, and it's a long story, but anyway, he ended up meeting her. And that's why she came to Garrett County to visit the site of the Thomas Kennedy plantation, which was Uncle Tom's cabin was supposedly there. So we have some good pictures of that house. It's long gone, and the cabin's behind it. So, that's an interesting story, and it is a novel. Now, she didn't write a historic, this is a product of her imagination and life experiences, but she wrote another book, and a lot of people don't know about that, called The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, which she divulges a lot of these places and she visited and characters that she used. So it's a fascinating story.
Speaking of books, have you read Iron Baby Angel?
No.
That's, full disclosure, I haven't read it either, but it was written, I think, around maybe the 1920s or 30s. It was written by somebody from Danville about Danville, and he changed all the names, and it was scandalous and salacious when it came out. So,
have you ever heard of the drunken poet of Danville, Thomas Johnson Jr.?
No.
We need to do a podcast about him.
You might have to bleep some of it. I mean, this guy he's called the drunken poet of Danville. He was here in the late 1700s.
Okay.
And he's absolutely hilarious.
And he's a genius.
He's a genius.
He had published books of poetry?
Yes. And this was when Boyle County was actually Mercer County then, okay? So, and he just rails on the politicians and the preachers. It's amazing.
But he uses poetry.
He uses poetry as his format.
It's amazing. Some of his works and some of the poetry he wrote is just astounding.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, well, no, see, most people haven't. And it's one of the first published poetical works in Kentucky, I believe the first. And it was republished many times. And it's a lot. I don't know if anybody has an original first edition, but I had a copy through University of Kentucky that was like an 1821 edition, which had been probably published 3 or 4 times. But he's a hoot now.
This has occurred when the tavern on 2nd Street,
Gill's Tavern. Yeah, he takes a poem about going in there and getting there late and there's no food left. He asked the Lord to bless these empty dishes. And
that was a hotbed of political discussion too, wasn't it, that tavern?
Yeah, it was. Of course, then we go and do some stories about old Danville. You talk about the political club at Danville, the Anaconda Club. But what I would like to do a podcast about is the football team at Center College that beat Harvard.
Was George Chin on that team?
I don't think so. There was, I'm trying to think of his name, that lived in Danville, because I talked to him. I'm not prepared to.
I bet we can look it up.
Yeah, there was one guy that stayed here in Danville that was on that team. Norris Armstrong was on that team. And but I'd really like, that was one of the first football teams in the South was Center College. I'd love to see a Center Harvard game today. And people dress at that period. and have some old cars of that era and just try to relive that. But I don't think Harvard will play us today.
Well, and the Texas A&M 12th man, that came from a game they played when Center went down there and was beating them up and down the field. So I'm sure Center would love to have you do an episode on their football team, the C6 HO
maybe
team.
that would be something we could do another Sharecast. We could do it at Center.
I think Larry Vaught is really the guy we need to get involved with that because he really knows that story really well.
Trying to think who else would have. I'd say Nelson Rhodes. He was about as big a Center fan as ever was, but that would be a great episode to do. And people don't understand what a media event that game was. And it was hyped up. It was as big as any national championship we have now. But they probably didn't have the television rights weren't as lucrative back then. But
well,
right.
I would like to say this. Brian's one of the finest young men I know. And I'm so proud of him. And I would never say no to Brian Wofford. And he's just he's one of the people just don't know what a great guy he is. And I do because I've known him all of his life. So I'm very proud of him.
Well, you guys make a great team, and I know, Brian, you're doing things at the jail trying to not just incarcerate people, but to help people get going in the right direction. And
that's the great thing about my job, being the jailer, is I get to meet people at their lowest and offer them a hand up. And that's not just me; that's my entire staff. I mean, that's our philosophy.
As a side note, how are things out there?
Our numbers are starting to go back up.
Are they?
And which we knew it would. The big thing right now is still trying to keep COVID out.
Yeah.
Because the way our building is designed and built and set up, if it gets in, everybody has it. And I don't know what we'll do if I don't have staff that can come. If they're sick and you can't come to work, what do we do?
I don't know. Is the overcrowding as bad as it has been in recent memory?
We're actually down. Today we're at 168. We have 220 beds. Of course, we hit a little over 400 before pre-COVID back, and we were staying right before COVID. We were staying around 280, 285. It's starting to creep back up, and a lot of people that were released due to COVID, they're not showing up, and the judges are giving them third and fourth chances to come to court, and they're not showing up, or they're not going to treatment and different things. So that's why I'm a big proponent on having those things on the inside of the jail: treatment, mental health, because they're there and they're sober. I think we'll be more successful if we focused on providing those services inside the jail versus letting them go on the outside.
Now, and I know for so many people, this lockdown and the anxiety and the stress that go along with it are triggers for the substance abuse. Anything else we want to talk about?
I'm good.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much. We've enjoyed it.
Harold Edwards.
You're a great interviewer.
Harold Edwards, Brian Wofford, thank you guys for being with me today. That's all I got. But wait, there's more. You know what it's time for. What's up, Danville? What's up, Danville? Of course, is the news you can use for Danville, Boyle County, and the surrounding region of Central Kentucky. Talk about the arts, what's going on in sports, and not-for-profit organizations. First up, the Norton Center for the Arts, there on Walnut Street, downtown Danville, continues their Culture Plus series on Thursday, November 19th at 7:30. You can join the Norton Center for the Arts for an important reflection on popular Thanksgiving traditions from the perspective of the indigenous peoples of Kentucky. This live Zoom event will include a discussion of the origins of Thanksgiving, cultural and land appropriation, and the National Day of Mourning, related arts and culture demonstrations, and opportunities to give thanks with more intention as our ever-changing American story evolves. During the program, you will meet poet and pushcart nominee Bridget Truex, American roots singer, songwriter, and composer Martha Redbone, Chair of the Kentucky Native American Heritage Commission Helen Dancer, and Native American musician Fred Nez Keems. Discussion will be moderated by Center College Assistant Professor of History Tara Strauch. The evening will include spirited dialogue, arts demonstrations, and performances by the panelists. An ASL interpreter will be provided for all the Culture Plus programs. For more information, check out thenortoncenter.com, or you can even call 859-236-4692. That's 859-236-4692. That will be in the format of a Zoom meeting. It's free, but you do have to register in advance. The Commonwealth Swim Club, a team I have mentioned on here before, it's a club swim team, will be hosting a golf scramble happening on Saturday, November 21st at the beautiful Danville Country Club. What? It might be cool or windy or rainy that day on Saturday, November 21st? Who cares? Pretend like you're in Scotland. And speaking of cold, the swim team is being forced, because of the COVID, to practice outside of the country club pool. That's no joke. These are some dedicated coaches and swimmers, so you can do your part. And if you don't want to golf, there are other sponsorship opportunities. Check out the Commonwealth Swim Club on Facebook. Of course, I'll put a link in my show notes. And lastly, Hop to the Holidays. The Heart of Danville Main Street program is kicking off the holiday season early this year with Hop to the Holidays. So the annual downtown gallery hop got axed, because of the COVID. But our intrepid local merchants are getting through all this together. On November 9th through the 14th, they are offering their usual gallery hop specials during a special holiday preview week. By the way, shout out to the new intern, Jules, in the production booth for that sound effect that they threw in there. As always, I want to thank my guest, Brian Wofford and Harold Edwards, for joining me. Be sure to check them out on their podcast, Uncommon History of the South. That's available wherever you can find me. You can find their podcast. Just put that in the search bar, Uncommon History of the South. I'll try to get links up to everything I mentioned, including that podcast, in my show notes. Do you want to get in touch with me, either about the show or real estate? The Logan Company, by the way, is my real estate brokerage. I'm always happy to talk about real estate. Send me an email, manaboutdanville@gmail.com. Where else can you find me? On my website, manaboutdanville.com. On Instagram, manaboutdanville. The Twitter handle is @mandanville. Of course, I've got a Facebook page, Man About Danville. You can find this podcast on the Apple Podcast app, which is already on your phone, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and just about anywhere else you listen. You can even use your Amazon Echo device to listen. Just say, "Hey, Alexa, play the podcast Man About Danville." By the way, I also have a YouTube channel. You can listen. You can throw me up on your TV screen and listen to me, although it's just a still picture, but my mother likes it, so that's cool. If you have a moment, hit the subscribe button wherever you listen. I really appreciate those of you who have taken the time to give me a rating or review. Those are always welcome. That's all I've got. Be well, have a good weekend, and thanks for listening.
That's it. We're out. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Subscribe to Man About Danville wherever you access your favorite podcasts, and be sure to tell your friends about us. You've been listening to Man About Danville with Logan H. Gurman, brought to you by the Logan Company, a commercial and residential real estate brokerage for Danville and Central Kentucky. Know someone who would be a good guest? Want to be a guest yourself? Have an idea for the show? Get in touch with us. Find all our contact information on the web at manaboutdanville.com. Thanks for joining us.